Hey everyone, before we get into the podcast, we want to announce some updates with our Power Monkey courses leading into 2022. We are excited about continuing to offer our gymnastics and weightlifting combo courses, 1 and 2 day offerings. If you go to powermonkeyfitness.com, search under the events tab, you'll be able to see what we already have on the agenda for 2022. We will be expanding into kettlebell offerings as well. Those are already up on the site too. If you're looking to host one yourself, please contact us at info@powermonkeyfitness.com and we'll get one of the courses out your way if one's not already on the agenda. Come hang out with us, learn some technical expertise when it comes to weightlifting, gymnastics, and now kettlebell. Hopefully see you soon. Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, and this week we have another guest host, again being Jordan Samuel with us. And our guest for the week is none other than Jacob Heppner himself. Now, most of you probably know Jacob for his incredible achievements on the athletic side as an individual athlete at the CrossFit Games, having finished in the top 10 multiple times. He has recently stepped away from the competitive side of the sport as an individual and is now taking on new roles as an entrepreneur within the fitness world. He has multiple businesses going on. Talk a little bit about what those are like, what he's got going on outside of the gym, how he is mentoring some athletes who are coming up, trying to follow in his footsteps as potential games competitors. The guy is just straight up hilarious. He has so many great stories. Talk a little bit about his recent fight that he had against Josh Bridges, that boxing match that I know a lot of you probably saw. Great speaking with Jacob. First time we actually had some in-depth conversations, and hopefully it's not the last. We hope you enjoy this one. Well, I know you've done probably tons of these before, so nothing really new here. Jordan and I will kind of go through, but anything you don't want us to touch on?
Yeah. I've done so many of these. It's like a free-form conversation, and no, there's nothing in particular I not want to talk about. It's fully up to you.
All right, so we'll start with strip clubs. That'll be the first part of conversation. You brought it up, so that's where we're going with it.
So I guess the real question is, what kind of a strip club is it? Is it one that you used to work at, or is it one that ladies work at?
Yeah, no, really, honestly, my thought process is whoever does like the business marketing for this company really needs, like you said, Dave, really needs to really focus on we've got the best girls or guys. I've never been in there, so I don't know who's in there. The best, I should say, the best clientele and the best Wi-Fi or
absolutely
out here.
Absolutely, dual purpose.
Why are they not marketing that?
Are you doing some research for a potential upcoming episode of Jacob of all trades kind of a thing?
You know what? I would love to bring that freaking thing back. Like, I actually, I had a company that's we're in talks with, and they're like, "Hey, we want to do some YouTube series with you. Like, have you ever done them before?" And I was like, "Hold the phone." I was like, the first thing I sent them was that episode. I was like, "Just watch this." Yeah. And they were like, "Are you dancing in high heels in a class?" I was like, "Yes." And I'm legit at it.
Yeah. It's all kind of downhill from there, though, right? What do you do for a follow-up episode to that? You know?
Yeah, honestly, I told him, I was like, it's like, like when you're in English 101 class and your teacher's like, you got to hook the reader. You got to hook the reader in that first thesis statement. I was like, oh, I'm going to hook them. And then it's going to go downhill because it's not going to be as good.
Then they're going to wonder, why are we still here watching this? I don't even know anymore.
Hey, Jacob, just go back. Just go back to dancing again. Like, no. We just want to see you. I had so many, it's actually, don't ever Google yourself, especially you, Dave, probably. But don't ever Google yourself. I shouldn't say Google. Don't ever search for your name in Reddit. Okay, it's bad. You get down a deep hole. So there's a whole thread on there about how Jacob Heppner has a wife, but he's most certainly homosexual on Reddit. And there's a huge thread on that. So if you're ever bored one day, go read.
People have way too much time on their hands. Way too much time on their hands.
Well, I'm the one reading it, so I probably have way too much stuff on my hands also.
So before we got on the podcast, one of the things Jordan and I were talking about, we were getting some info on you, and the thing that kept popping up for us was that ridiculous gym space that you have. I want to ask, we're trying to create a little like mini version of a Power Monkey little space here at my house, and is that on your property? Is that just specifically meant for training? Is that party house? What is that? That is epic.
You know, Dave, I was actually driving here to the strip club, and on my way here, I was thinking I had to hurry up because I had to make it in time. But it snowed, so I was like, "Don't crash." But two, I was like, either before the call or after the call, I need to tell Dave, like, the purpose of the barn, which I'll explain in a second, is not only for me to hold camps in, it's also to bring other people in here to have access to the Kansas City community, because we represent like the middle. I'm literally the middle of the country, because for some reason people overlook us, and I hate it about it. But anyways, so yeah, the idea is not just for me, but yes, it is on. We own 50 acres of land outside Kansas City. We're like 30 minutes from the Kansas City airport, or MCI International, and it's 50 acres and it's on my property. We have it was a small farmhouse, like a 2-bedroom, really small, like bathroom in the middle of the house. Like you go to the bathroom, everyone in the house smells, the kind of concept. And got a really small farmhouse we renovated that we're living in now. And we actually break ground, I believe, in April on the house that I'm going to die in the back of the property. So we'll have that house, the property to rent out for camps or whatever. And then, yeah, the barn is also on the property too. So it's all.
How big is that barn?
50 by 70 in the interior, and then it's got two 50 by 25 concrete slabs out in the front and the back with an outdoor rig, and then we'll have running routes out in the cornfield. Nothing like running your running route through a cornfield in Kansas. It just defines the state, I think.
Absolutely. But you're not from originally over there, right? You're a California boy and you moved out there?
Yeah, I was born and raised in San Joaquin Valley, in an ag area of San Joaquin Valley. Agriculture, sorry. And we moved out here. I moved out here with my parents in the middle of high school. So I split high school 2 years out in Cali and then 2 years in actually southern Missouri, and then went to college up in northern Missouri, and then kind of fell in love with the Kansas City area because I had an internship working for the Army as a civilian, and fell in love with the area and decided never to move. So here I am.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, if there is opportunity to come and check out the space, we'd love to. I mean, those kind of things are all up our alley. We love seeing beautiful space like that, you know, if you can have it as an individual, but you can actually bring people in and use it as kind of a home base for events. That's what we kind of use our Tennessee location for. So if there's anything we can ever do out there, we'd love to.
We'll definitely talk. I'm sure we'll talk after this, but yeah, that's the option that I presented to a couple different subject matter experts in the CrossFit space in specific niches. So
amazing. Now, you as a competitor, you know, obviously, I think most people know you from the competitive world, what you've done as an athlete. It seems like you've transitioned away from competitive side of things a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you have so many things going on as an entrepreneur now. You seem to be a pretty active businessman, not only through your social media and things like that, but is that kind of the path that you're leaning into now past your 30s? Or are you looking at the competitive side still as a priority to you?
Yeah, good question. So from a CrossFit perspective, if we're just swinging at the CrossFit perspective for the competitive side, I believe I am done unless I am given an offer or a team that makes sense to me going forward in the future. I will not be, so that answers the CrossFit side of it. From a competitive standpoint, that is not just the subset of CrossFit. I still compete in things that are just not CrossFit related. I mean, like, I learned how to box in a year kind of concept. Or I compete essentially in the tactical games, which is a fitness and shooting competition. But yes, from the CrossFit perspective, I have pivoted, I should say, into more of a entrepreneur business side of things instead of being solely focused on just competing. I mean, from my perspective, like I always wanted to, I never wanted to be forced out of sport. I never wanted to be told, yo, Jake, you need to stop doing this. Your body's breaking down for whatever reason. I wanted to take my own way out. And, but I wanted to stay involved in a sport. I mean, very similar to what you're doing. You want to stay involved in a sport that has given so much to us. And so for me, that was the companies that I have now and being able to give back to others, whether it be camps on my property or programming online or companies that I'm part of. And so, yeah, that's kind of the future for me in the sport.
Yeah, I love hearing, you know, athletes at such a high level. You know, you play football as well and move into the next thing, right? Competitive wise. And like CrossFit was that for maybe a decade for you. Now you're moving into this new space, whether it be boxing or the tactical games, but specifically tactical game. You know, we were talking to Christian Harris and Meg Reardon recently, and they had been doing some Spartan games and getting into something a little bit different, using their fitness in a new way. What specifically drove you to the tactical games? You mentioned some internships and stuff with the Army early on. Is there something that kind of drove you to showing an interest in the tactical stuff?
Yeah, so you kind of hit on two parts though, so I'll break it down in two parts. Number one, you mentioned Christian Harrison and Megan Reardon trying things outside of CrossFit, and that's something that I have said for stinking years. Is I don't know why our sport does this, but I get it because when most athletes are elite athletes, like take an NFL football player, like they're really good at a sport, they're very athletic, but for some reason they don't go try other things. Now, I understand that from a football perspective, or because their sport is so niche, right? But let's get real with ourselves. Our sport is fitness, right? It's fitness. Like you should be able to take what we can do, swim, run, bike, row, lift, gymnastics, whatever, and apply it to a crap ton of things. Spartan race, tactical games, Tough Mudder, bowling, I don't care, flag football. Like we should be able to go off and literally, we wouldn't be experts at it, but we should be able to take a high-level athlete in this sport and go out and actually be fairly decent at anything we try our hands to. Boxing, as an example. And so I've been saying that for years, and I'm glad that people are actually trying to do that, because for some reason in our sport, there's a lot of men and women who are squeamish to go out there and try something new. And I think it's probably because they're considered elite at what they do in this sport. And at one time, we all learned double unders. We all whipped ourselves to high heaven with that stupid rope and freaking hated and cursed it. And so I think they're scared of stepping back and saying, now I'm a newbie, or now I'm a rookie in something and I don't feel comfortable. When in actuality, that's where, as we all know, mental and like human growth occurs. Is like, I'm gonna go try boxing. Have I boxed before? Absolutely not. Will I have fun? Probably. Will I get punched in the face? Yes. But will I learn a lot about myself and test limits? Freaking absolutely. So I'm actually stoked to see a lot of people in the sport try new things, to answer the first part of your question.
I have a question about that. You mentioned the boxing and you've learning new things and so forth. And so that whole experience going and boxing with Josh and having a trainer that was specifically training you for that event, what had, like, if anything, what were the biggest takeaways? What did you learn from that you are maybe now incorporating into your daily training?
Yeah, I've said this to a couple different people. That was, and I actually told it, I think Cooper was the one who mentioned me for this, right? Cooper Marsh?
Yeah.
Yep. So I actually saw Cooper in Wadapalooza, and we actually talked about this, is regardless of boxing, regardless of how it ended, win, lose, draw, whatever happened, whatever happened. That was probably easily, I would say, top 5 best decisions and best experiences I've ever had in my life. Maybe even top 3. And I would sometimes maybe rank it in front of the CrossFit Games. And you might be saying to yourself, well, you're not a boxer, Jacob, like you're a CrossFitter. But I felt, when I first started CrossFit, I felt very uncomfortable. Like we're whipping ourselves to the rope, we're trying to learn double unders. But I wasn't given 6 months and then said, now you're going to go to the CrossFit Games and everyone's going to watch you compete. Like I wasn't told that, right? I had years of training behind a curtain and people laughing at me. And then I was able to go out into regionals, and then from regionals to games. But for boxing, I was essentially already a known figure in fitness, and then told, you've got 6 months to go get your face hit in Dubai. And oh, by the way, we're going to film this and everyone's going to watch this. And so that was an eye-opening experience of really like, people are now looking at you a lot, and you're expected to go out, step outside your comfort zone, and try something completely new. And so for me, there was a lot of growth that occurred there. Because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I wasn't nervous. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there was not anxiety or stress that was, like I would sit in the shower some nights and think, why did I sign up for this? Like, I'm an idiot. But doing it, and when you're finally finished and that weight and that burden is taken off your back, I realized, man, there was so much learning that occurred there. Like going forward in life, like the concept of like, I always hear people say, oh, I'm really nervous and I'm nervous to try this. I'm thinking to myself, man, I stepped into a ring with a guy who wanted to knock my block off, and I had 6 months of training for it. Like,
man, he's a trained killer, that dude.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
now,
literally.
and then obviously boxing and killing is a little two different things, but absolutely. And so the idea of like, I'm nervous for something going into the CrossFit Games, or I'm nervous to go try there, I'm nervous to have that conversation, that doesn't exist anymore. Like it's not super scary, considering I took something on that was a little bit scarier. I think Josh actually. Go ahead.
Dave, it reminds me of something that Chad said on another podcast, where he talks specifically about training how to compete. It's not just always about like training your skills and conditioning and so forth. It's like, if you want to get better at competing, you got to go compete. And so to your point, Jacob, like taking that to another level, go compete in something that you're not the best at is going to be an even more potent form of that training,
To clarify, Jordan, I was the worst at. I think when they were like, yo, you want to box? I remember telling my wife I had never put on boxing gloves in my life, ever. Like, ever. I think maybe one time as like a high school kid, like hit my buddy in the face and I took him off.
Mhm.
And like my wife had taken boxing classes. So I was coming in with zero knowledge. I remember when I first showed up for day one, the guy who was coaching me was like, "Are you a good dancer?" And I was thinking to myself, well, I can dance in high heels, but like, I don't think that counts here.
But you bring up an interesting point that, obviously you've competed at an extremely high level in some other sports, but there was something about boxing that kind of hit you uniquely that created anxiety, created additional stress because it was new, because it was something you hadn't done before, but also because there were eyeballs on you.
Yep.
And obviously there's the component of someone potentially knocking you out too, right? That's a component that you don't have in CrossFit nearly as much, like you're hitting the bar in the head, right? So you have these different components. What would you say what was the thing that was really stressing you out? The potential of getting knocked out, or the fact that people were watching you almost like you're naked, right? You're out there doing something for the first time and it's being viewed worldwide. You have a crowd there who's watching you and saying, why is this guy boxing? His technique is terrible. He looks so dumb up there. What is he doing? Mm-hmm. Versus, you being in an environment that's more comfortable and controlled and saying, I did this for 10 years. I know what I'm doing. Watch me perform rather than me watch me do this for the first time and hope for the best.
Sure. It's a good question. So, I think for me personally, I could have cared less, and I think Josh would have agreed. Like, neither one of us want to get knocked out because the jokes that would ensue from that the memes would be fantastic. But neither one of us wants to get knocked out. But at the same time, I'm not nervous about getting hit in the face. I'm not nervous because we had done that quite a bit. Condition the face. I wasn't nervous about getting hit in the face. What I was nervous about was the latter part of your point was I am a known entity in the fitness realm. And so when I step out in good faith and try something new, a lot of people, speaking of Reddit, a lot of people want to quickly judge you and say, oh, look at Dave, like trying this new thing. Like he's terrible, like polo. He doesn't even know how to ride a horse. I don't know why I picked on polo, but there you go. Like, does he even know how to ride a horse? Like, he's terrible. Everyone wants to be your own biggest critic when they're not willing to step outside and try something new. Now, do I care what people think? I can tell you no all the time, but we all know deep down inside, we do care a little bit about what people say about us. And so I think I was most nervous about the idea that the first time I was ever going to be in a boxing match without headgear was going to be on television or streamed, whatever, in front of thousands and thousands of people. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that was the most nerve-wracking part was, I wanted to put forward my best effort and showcase that, hey, yeah, I'm a CrossFitter, but I can also take what I've learned from CrossFit and apply that learning capabilities to a new sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got to say that, you were getting a lot of props from the commentators for the fact that you guys had the conditioning to be able to stick around for the full 6 rounds. I mean, it's a testament to CrossFit, the fact that you guys were able to keep your technique in place and do all the things that, most people would see break down from someone who's in there for the first time. But I'm curious about how you did feel the next day. The adrenaline kind of kicks in for that day, right? And you're feeling like a superhero when you're done. But were you guys banged up the day after? You and Josh kind of commiserate and just sit in cold plunges for a week afterwards? What do you guys feel like afterwards?
We got done after the fight, and they were like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, me and Josh are getting a beer, man. We actually didn't get a beer. He got a beer, and I got the fruitiest drink on the menu. He ordered it for me, and it was perfect. That's what he knew that's what I drank. So I don't even know. It was like a strawberry daiquiri or something. I don't remember. I feel like a 21-year-old girl. But we sat around and laughed. We actually flew out the next day. He actually went back home the next day. And then my wife and I went to the Maldives for a few days. And I'm not going to lie, like, my body felt fine. I didn't get delivered any really hard body shots, but my body was fine. But my face was sore. I have never had a sore face in my life. And I was like, you forget there's muscles in your face that allow me to, move my face around. And my face was sore for the next couple of days. I did have I got a pretty bad eye and a pretty bad nose, but my face was pretty sore.
Yeah.
Do you have any intention of doing another fight with anybody?
Hell no. They actually asked me. The first thing they asked me was, hey, Jacob, congratulations on your fight. You're winning your first match. You're 1-0 in a whatever, not even like whatever real fight. They're like, do you want to do another? What's your career look like? I'm like, I'm done. Like, you're done. You couldn't
Going out
pay,
on top.
I mean, you could pay me enough, but I don't think you want to pay me that much to see some amateur fight. Like, let's get real with ourselves.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, from boxing, you know, we talked about you moving away from the competitive world, but you seem to be doing a little bit of coaching now too. I'm not quite sure if Olivia is in your gym training with you, but you seem to be doing some work with one of the top teen sensations out there. Can you tell us a little bit about what that relationship looks like with you and new up-and-coming star?
Yeah, absolutely. So she's actually been with me. She's currently 16 now. She just turned 16 like a couple weeks ago. I should know her birthday because she writes up a countdown on the whiteboard every night. But she started with me when she was 9. Now you might be asking yourself, Jacob, like what 9-year-old shows up at your barn that you're like, yeah, come work out, me 9-year-old. She has a sister who's 3 years older than her, Ellie Kerstetter, and Ellie competed at the games for many years, for 3 years. And then when she aged out, she went to college and focused on college, which I totally support. And so when Ellie first showed up, because she was doing very well to train at my barn, and back when I was on a different piece of property, 10 acres down the road with a very much smaller barn, I would not have invited Dave to coach a seminar there. It would have been just me and him. Ellie showed up and was like, hey, can I bring my younger sister? She's 9. Her name's Olivia. So Olivia showed up then, gave her a PVC pipe. She did stuff in the corner. I didn't coach her. And obviously she's been with me since she was 9 every week. I mean, every day of the week, or, you know, excluding rest days for the past 6 years or so, 6-7 years. And so was of course not allowed to compete in the open until she was 14. She's been doing the open workouts since she was 10. And according to her score, she would have qualified to go to the teenage division when she was 10, 11, and 12, and 13 to go. But of course, the CrossFit Games doesn't allow that because of insurance, which I'm okay with. And then she went, when she was a 14-year-old, that's when COVID happened. She qualified to go to the games, but then the COVID happened, and so she couldn't go compete at the games that year. And then when she was 15, she went to the 14-15 and won that division, which I expected nothing less. And now she's going to be in the 16 to 17 age-year-old division now. So yeah, she's out every night at the barn. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. She's out there at nights in the barn or the mornings, training with us in the barn. So essentially it's a bunch of adults and a 16-year-old.
Right. Like, is there something you can pinpoint as saying like, this girl has it to compete at a high level? What do you recognize at a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old that kind of stands out to you to say this person is able to compete at a higher level beyond just maybe a teen division?
Yeah, sure. So being 9 or 10, you know, 9 or 10-year-olds, because I was 9 or 10 at one point, can be quite finicky, right? You don't know, you know, they may be really good at something, but they don't enjoy it. And so they want to drop out of gymnastics or whatever the case may be. I'm sure you've seen that in your sport.
Sure.
And so that's really hard to judge. I would say as you get a little older, you can kind of put your finger on it a little bit more that they're going to stick with it. Probably wasn't until she was probably 12 or 13, I started realizing she could be really, really good at this. I didn't realize that before, but like, you know, never sure if she's going to just decide I want to do competitive gymnastics or whatever, or cheerleading. And so it wasn't until later I started realizing she's really, really good. And her sister was there to push her along the whole way. The one thing, looking at it now, hopefully she doesn't watch this. The one thing that I really like about what Olivia has, because I see it in her that I had in myself. And most good competitors have this. I would say sometimes you don't have to have it, but I think one of the better ones do, is we're all a little bit angry. Not angry at the world, not angry at something specific, for instance, you know, like, oh, I hate this person or whatever, but they have some anger or fire. Some people equate to fire, some kind of madness, that they can kind of channel that their anger into, hey, I'm going to go win this because I deserve this, because I put a lot of time, I've done a lot of sacrifice, and I'm mad about that, so I better win this darn thing. And I see that in her because it was also in me. And that's really what I like about her, is the fact that she's also a competitor. Like, she can show up and be angry and she wants to go out there and win, regardless of who she competes with. And so the conversation that is occurring now in the barn, that, again, hopefully she doesn't watch this, is the idea of, I don't agree with this decision for the games personally, but again, I don't make the rules, is in years past, teenagers could make the decision if they want to go the team division, they can go individual elite women. As you saw from Mal O'Brien, Emma Lawson, all these fantastic females in the sport that are role models for girls like Olivia, and are good role models too. And so we saw them able to qualify the teen and then also try to qualify for individuals. If it didn't work, they could have a backup of teens, whatever. And now they got rid of that rule. So you got to make a decision at semis. The road splits at semifinals to decide, do you want to go individual semis or do you want to go teen semis? What do I want to call them? So they make a decision this year. Kind of sucks a little bit. I think I understand the concept of, well, they're taking a spot away from someone else. If a 16-year-old girl can beat you, you don't deserve to be there. You need to stay home and watch that from your TV. Like, that's how that works. The role's not a nice place. So we're going to kind of see what the open happens and how quarterfinals goes. And then ultimately will be her decision to make the decision on which route she wants to take. And she has to understand that she could go try to go for the games, become the youngest competitor ever to go to the games. And I think do fantastic, like 50th percentile easily. But she has to understand that the backup plan for that is you don't go to the games. Right. You end up sitting home and being a spectator. No one goes to the games. Right. But then the caveat, the other side of that is you can go to the teenage division 16 and 17, go womp on them if you want to, but like, what fun is that? So we'll see. That decision hasn't had to be made now. We'll kind of do a litmus test on the open and quarters to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, it's cool to see that. And it's probably something that, you can follow along with on your and her social media and just kind of track the journey a little bit. But you touched on something that kind of resonated a little bit with me. I'm curious, and Jacob, you mentioned from your perspective, but Jordan, you as an athlete as well, this idea of competing angry and having to have this fire, however you want to verbalize the mentality of being able to be your best because you're up against the odds and you feel like maybe you're the underdog, or that's how I competed too. And so kind of it was something that hit me. And I remember leading up to the World Championships one year, our coaches sat us all down and basically asked us why we were competing, like what motivated us. And I think it was important because while gymnastics is an individual sport, we were competing as a team, right? So what we were trying to do is figure out how we could all optimize our own individual competitive situation by the rest of the group facilitating that. Meaning, if somebody competed best by the rest of the team staying quiet and not saying anything, we needed to know that. If one guy wanted us to like scream our heads off and be in his face to be able to compete at his best, we needed to know that. And so we just went around saying, what makes you tick competitively? Are you an angry competitor? Are you someone that just loves the crowd and loves the energy? Are you that kind of competitor? And I was more of that person that competed angry, feeling like, I was the underdog and wasn't the talent that was surrounding me, and I needed to do a little bit more. But I'm curious, you were mentioning that you've noticed that a lot with the other competitors around you. Do you feel like that's something that's innate within CrossFitters, or do you feel like that's just a subset that you've maybe spoken to? And Jordan, I'm curious kind of how you were as a competitor.
I was very much the internally driven, angry, fire kind of guy. And I remember when I got into CrossFit and, you'd be doing like an open workout at the gym or whatever, and people would start screaming at you. And that would actually piss me off even more. Like, get the fuck out of my face. Let me just drive myself, so to speak. But that's just me personally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think not everyone ticks the same way, is driven by the same forces. I don't necessarily think that a crowd driven, like a good example is like Noah Olson is definitely a crowd favorite because he feeds off a crowd.
Yeah.
And so does Noah have that anger inside him also? I don't know. Does Cole Sager? I don't know these guys well enough to be like, I spend every living waking second with them. But I know from my perspective, when I was competing in CrossFit, I was always undervalued. I know actually it always pops up on my Facebook memories every single freaking year. And I think I post it every year because I love it. But in obviously there was sectionals a long time ago, but then we had regionals for a while. And we had the regionals where top 40 went and only top 3 went to the games. And then they decided to do this thing called super regionals. And so my first year of the games was 2014, and I qualified second out of the North Central under Kyle Kassenbauer and with Alex Netty. And we were the North Central. And so the next year, 2015, they created this concept of super regionals where they combined us with the Central East. And the Central East was known for having heavy hitters, Scott Panchik,
Sure.
Yes, Central East Beast, exactly. You got a bunch of freaks: Will Morad, Graham Holmberg, Mitch Froning, Scott Panchik. I mean, just freaks of athletes. And there was an article put out as soon as they announced who was getting paired with who, that no one from the North Central was going to be expected to qualify out of that region because the Central East was so good. And I remember that just pissed me the F off. And I remember, I think I printed it off and put it up my wall. And I was like, I'm not only going to go qualify, I'm going to go win the damn thing and then rub it in their freaking faces. And I even figured out who wrote the article and I tagged it in it. And I'm going to go rub it in your face and you're going to feel real freaking stupid. And that year, pride in my that is somewhat prideful, but pride does happen to make people fall to a degree. But showed up at 2015 Super Regionals that year. Just honestly annihilated a majority of the workouts and got to the final workout. One workout left with an 80-point lead in front of Scott Panchik. Pretty much, I can stroll this sucker, and I won this in the bag. And I'm about to freaking rub it in everyone's faces. Well, then we had this thing called the C70 shorty bar. We had to clean on a shorty bar that has 0 whip. Failed the last bar like 5 times. Finally crossed the finish line in dead last. It didn't matter. I was still going to the games, but I wasn't going to be able to pull off a first place finish. So wasn't able to rub that in that person's face. But anyways, the point is, like, I was always undervalued and looked as someone that, you're good, but you're not going to be that good. Boxing is a prime example. Hey, Josh Bridges, while SEALs don't necessarily have striking experience per se, killing and striking are 2 different things. I was completely looked at as, oh, you're the underdog. There's no way some guy who learns how to box in 6 months is going to learn how to box and strike very well to actually get into a ring with a SEAL. The same concept applied to the tactical games. The time I learned to spin boxing is the same time I learned to shoot. And so at the same time, I was learning to box and shoot at the same time with the progression of learning to going competing at nationals for tactical games. And I was looked at like, oh, you're a CrossFitter. You can't shoot with the crap. You'll probably be okay, but you're not going to do well. And so stuff like that has followed me along my life for some reason, which I'm okay with. That's fine. People have their own opinions.
Yeah. So do you feel, you had 3 top 10 finishes at the games, top finish 6, it's incredible. You're one of the fittest people ever to walk the planet. But I'm curious if that was enough for you. Do you feel like you're walking away from competitive side of CrossFit feeling like you've maximized your human potential? Or do you feel like you left anything out there that, maybe there was an event at that games that was a little bit off that could have placed you a little bit higher? Do you feel like you've maximized what you were capable of doing in that space?
Yeah, I don't go back and regret anything. Like, in my personal opinion, I'm a realist. My degree's in mathematics. I look at things from a real perspective. I can be as hot mind up in the clouds as I want. But when it comes down to it, I'm a realist. And I always knew I was never capable of winning the games. It was never going to happen with a full-time job and the things I had on my plate. Could I absolutely put my best foot forward and try for podium? Sure. Was it ever going to win? Absolutely not. So for me, the cap on my hat was being able to get top 10 year in and year out for a couple of years in a row was always a joy to me and a blessing.
That's, I mean, it's phenomenal accomplishment. And to be able to walk away now, we dance around this, but tactical games is something that really intrigues me. And we've had a couple other people talk about tactical games on the podcast in the past. You mentioned just picking up shooting for the first time. What can you tell our listeners a little bit of what goes into tactical games and what the training has been like for you and kind of what's intriguing about the experience?
Yeah. So personal opinion is I love learning new things, whether it be boxing or learning to do CrossFit or learning to run a business, whatever the case may be. And so for me, I started kind of jerking around, shooting guns here and there, just kind of off and on in 2018. And at that time, the tactical games had kind of started and I kept getting tagged in it. Like, you should go try this thing called the tactical games. And I'm like, I'm competing in CrossFit. I don't have time for that. That's not happening. And then as it went on and people kept tagging me in it, and that sport became a little bit more popular, I said, okay, well, when I'm done with CrossFit, I'll give it one shot. I'll go try one event to say I did it, so everyone get off my stinking back, and then I'll just walk away. So spent some time training for it and preparing for it. And what it reminded me of, why I fell in love with it, was because it reminded me of a grassroots CrossFit. Because in actuality, the people that are there are literally people who go to CrossFit gyms or CrossFit in their garage. And oh, by the way, just enjoy shooting competitively or just shooting in general. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was people that I just felt very fond of and connected with on just every basis. And so really fell in love with the community behind it. Reminded me of an early on CrossFit Games. People were there to help you. People would help you out. It wasn't like, even though Dave and I may be taking a field at the same time to compete, Dave was okay helping me out in the back to teach me how to do a muscle up, that kind of concept. Mm-hmm. And so that's what it reminded me of. That's what really spoke to me, because that's why a majority of us did CrossFit. Not because of the money, but it was because of the people that took us there that we really had a connection with. And that's what it reminded me in this sport. And so did my first one, really fell in love with it, and decided, okay, this is what I want to compete for the foreseeable future, unless something pulls me back into CrossFit. This is what I want to compete in the foreseeable future going forward, is this sport, because it is literally a 50-50 between fitness and firearms. So the best definition is go join a CrossFit gym, I tell people, and just do CrossFit. You do that and then go shoot, you'll be fantastic at this.
So is that literally the only major difference, is the inclusion of firearms? Or is there anything else that...
It's the inclusion of, it has functional fitness. Can't call it CrossFit. It has functional fitness in it. But imagine, Jordan, I took you out to some just field, and I was like, yo, we're going to work out. What do you think we're going to do? We're probably going to push a sled, pull a sled, probably sandbags over the shoulder, run with them. We're going to do crap ton of sandbags. We're going to run. We're going to do wheelbarrows. We're going to do farmer carries. We're going to drag bags, throw bags, all of course stuff. So essentially imagine very grunt levels, what I define as functional fitness. We're not going to do snatches. We're not going to do any gymnastics capabilities. Now, does a gymnast come in with some better body awareness as it relates to movements and shooting? Absolutely. But you're not going to see us jump on rings and do muscle ups and do bar muscle ups. But we do jump over yokes. So there is some concept there for body awareness. There's a lot of movements that kind of fit in that concept. But we take functional fitness inside of a field and then essentially add on top of that shooting, which makes it stress shooting. So if I told you as an example, Jordan, hey, here's a sandbag. It's a 150-pound sandbag. I want you to pick it up, throw it over your shoulder in full kit, right? So you got 15-pound vest. They use a 15-pound vest on 20, like CrossFit. 15-pound vest, all your mags, all your ammo, pistol, rifle slung behind you. I want you to pick that sandbag up, put it over your shoulder like 5 times. Then I want you to put it in the stress carry position. I want you to walk and or run with it about 25, 30 yards, drop the sandbag, and then I want you to take accurate shots on paper with your pistol and then with your rifle, and then clear those weapons, make sure they're cold before you turn around, take that sandbag back and do that 3 times through. And then when we're done, I'll take your time and I'll be like, yo, Jordan, you got 8 minutes. I don't know. 8 minutes was your time. Now let's go look at your paper and see how many misses you have, because every miss is 10 seconds. So it adds another concept to it, where now it's like first person across the finish line doesn't necessarily mean the first person who won the workout. Like, we're going to go count hits, and Jordan may have just dropped them all. So if we have, hypothetically, if you shot 15 rounds total, each round of 3, that's 45 total shots. That's 450 seconds. Divide that by 60. That comes out to be what? Almost, I'm terrible, like 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes. It's a lot of time.
I love that balancing act between intensity and skill. I think there's a lot of value there.
It takes into consideration 10 physical skills. It takes into consideration accuracy a little bit more, right? Something Absolutely. That there's a bunch of physical skills that don't get as much attention as some of the others. And I always kind of bring up balance. In gymnastics world, balance is one that is at the forefront of being able to move properly, that I don't think CrossFitters have a tendency to focus on enough. We do a lot of balance exercises at Power Monkey Camp, but the idea of accuracy, I think, is a huge component that kind of gets tied in. I'm curious, we've talked about in the past too, about being surprised that some kind of shooting event never ended up in the games before with Castro having running events and him being a SEAL and things like that. What do you think about that being a potential for the future in the CrossFit Games?
I mean, would I have absolutely loved it? Yes. Is it smart? No. I mean, just not fair to it's not fair to Europeans or Australians. Like some of those guys, I mean, could they do an air rifle? Yeah, but come on. It's an air rifle. Like, let's do an actual firearm. But just number one, the insurance, but two, like, actually, no clarification. It's a funny story. I was actually asking the guy that owns CrossFit Games about his insurance, and his insurance is actually cheaper than running a CrossFit competition because there are more injuries in CrossFit that you have to deal with than injuries for shooting. Because I mean, obviously a shooting injury is very acute, probably, right? You're getting shot. Yeah. That's very, very low. But yeah, I don't think putting any shooting of any nature, whether it's, I didn't agree with the rogue concept of using air rifle there either, because there are some guys who literally never touched a firearm, whether it be air rifle or a regular rifle, in their lives.
Yeah. All right. So what about this one then? Because we talked about this one too. I'm curious about your take
Archery?
on it specifically. Huh?
Archery?
No.
Grappling, right?
Wrestling.
Yeah, grappling. Yeah.
Grappling. Because it was something that Christian had brought up, and Kalipa, we were talking about with him recently about, whether or not, him doing so much jiu-jitsu and so many people grappling and wrestling jiu-jitsu these days. Do you think that would be something that you would have liked seeing added to an event, or you see value there?
Sure. As long as I wasn't in a heat with like Alex Anderson or any of those freaks. Absolutely. Like, I don't want to get torn apart. I don't know. Like, there is definitely a cool concept, especially a viewership spectator perspective, to like, I compare it to the Spartan Games. They kind of obviously did that for their attempt at trying to make a cool sport. That was really cool to watch, for sure. Would it have been cool for CrossFit? Yes. Would it have been good for the athletes? I don't think so. I mean, the injuries are very, very low to get injured doing that. But I think, like, if you look at it, like, if I'm going to get into a heat with a guy who obviously has wrestled and has a lot of good background and who could possibly hurt me, is it worth me trying to keep those points? Probably not. So I just would have tapped. I mean, you saw that in the Spartan Games too. Like, I would have been like, no, I mean, okay, if I'm with someone like maybe like Dave who has no background, cool, okay, then we'll just, hunky dory, slap each other around, have a good time. But like, if I get into a ring and let's say Jordan has a deep background in it, or Khalifa shows up, like, first of all, Khalifa's way too big for me too. But like, if Khalifa showed up, man, I would be like, nope, you can have those points. Like, it's just not worth it in my end. But it would be a cool knockoff other sport to like see it involved, like in a, the Australian CrossFit Championships did their like flag thing where they like ran to a flag in the beach. Like, that was cool to see them. If they did a competition in Greece, it'd be cool to see them wrestle in Greece at a semifinal. But I don't think for the games would be smart.
Yeah, I think that as long as it's something that was, announced well ahead of time, where people could like maybe an entire season ahead of time, so they could get some preparation for it. But it always reminds me of a quote that Spieler said once, because as you know, he was a high level wrestler in college. And he said, sandbag work is great, but now try lifting a sandbag that weighs the same amount of you and is fighting back. Like, it's a completely different story. And I think that there's a lot of value there. I mean, there's problem solving that goes into it. There's certainly technique and conditioning that goes into it. And I think that it is an area that is perhaps missed a little bit, but I understand the concerns and, the arguments on both sides.
Yeah, I just like to hear athletes' take on it. Khalifa being as big as he is and how capable he is.
He wanted it.
Yeah,
he did.
Yeah, of course he did.
Yeah, but his take is maybe a little skewed. Like, I'd love to hear, somebody's my size. Obviously, Bailey and Spieler are my height, but they weigh like, Bailey weighs like 40 pounds more than I do. So
yeah, I was gonna say, Bailey's not your size.
Yeah, right. My height.
But to that point though, like Bailey was talking once, we were out in Hawaii, and he was talking. You remember Russell Berger? He used to work at CrossFit.
Yeah,
he was like a purple belt jiu-jitsu or something, and he was getting Dan to do jiu-jitsu with him one day, and Dan had never done it before. And they get to the ground, and Dan just like bear hugs him, and just holds him in place, and and Russell's like, can't move. He's like, no, this isn't what you're supposed to do. And Dan's like, I'm not letting you do anything.
That's what I'm doing.
This is what I'm doing. And so, I mean, yeah, bigger guy, stronger guy, you can do some things, even if you don't have the knowledge.
Love it. Well, I want to touch a little bit on the entrepreneur stuff. We talked about it early on, but we're small business owners ourselves, and you've moved into having a few different avenues to be able to get your content across through Grit Performance, through Stream Fitness Live. I think that was something that kind of emerged through the pandemic. I remember talking with Panchik early on about it. Is there something that kind of is driving you from a business perspective, the one that you're putting the most time in right now? Can you kind of talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I think the one that's taking up a lot of my time, I don't say that in a negative way whatsoever. And again, it's not like exponentially more, it's just probably a little bit more. Is I actually, when did this start? Almost the same time I started with Stream with Scott and all them, is we started myself and Mike Baglio and Jim Crowell, if you remember Jim Crowell from OPEX, and was a CEO. We started a company called Ignite, which was a different take on a way to get programming from the coach to the athlete via an app. It's a little bit different take than what was currently out there. And so we actually sold that company, or got bought out completely. And now I work with Push Press. So Push Press bought us out. And as we know, Push Press is a big company that's been around for a long time, with a back end for gyms that were brick and mortar for point of sale kiosks and check-ins and all sorts of things. But it was mainly focused on brick and mortar, like you go to the gym. And so what they realized is they wanted another option to actually have the ability to also work with brick and mortar gyms, but also work with online coaches that didn't have a brick and mortar space. And so they completely bought us out. I work with them now. And so I'm on them daily with meetings, making that product better. That product is now called Train. They renamed it to Train. And so I now work quite a bit with them and making that product better and getting it ready and ramped to deliver to the masses. So that's still a work in progress.
What was unique about Ignite when you guys first put it out that was different than the way that athletes and coaches were kind of getting programming disseminated then?
Yeah, so the different concept that, I won't go into all the specific nitty gritty, but the overarching, if I had to give you like the big boiler point difference, was because I actually got on the app and was using it as a coach from Grit. And then I realized this is actually a really cool, different take. I want to get involved, and just, made the offer of like, hey man, I like to buy into this company and then help you with some ideas I have. And so what I liked about it that was different than what currently existed was I got tired of jumping around from app delivery service, whatever you want to call them, to app delivery service or program delivery service, whatever you want to call them. And the program delivery service, they didn't really care about my retention. They cared about retaining me. And so how I felt was like, oh, I'm not going to name names, but this company cares about that Jacob and Grit Performance are on this app, okay, that I'm putting it's sticky enough that I don't want to leave, or they don't want me to leave. But they weren't helping me retain my clients in the long run. They weren't helping me retain those people. It was just like, hey, here's a service we can provide you. Good freaking luck. And it wasn't helpful to me. They would provide solutions that would allow clients of mine to jump around to other programs, which, as we all know, like, people are cherry pickers. They want to jump around from program to program. And when in actuality, you need to pick, it doesn't matter what program you pick, you need to pick one program and stick with it for at least for a few months, at least like 3-4 months to see a change. But people want to jump the next new and shiny thing instead of actually giving their full effort towards one thing. And so I kept seeing that happen and kind of gotten sick of that and was like, man, I need something that just really just values me. And so that's kind of where I went with the app. And then that's kind of the general concept that we've taken forward and applied to the business plan going forward.
And with Grit Performance specifically, this is your programming component. These are the workouts that you do on a regular basis. What's unique? What's kind of the core behind Grit Performance?
Yeah. So to clarify, I actually don't program for that. So I have a head coach. I have a coach that programs. I mean, I know my limits. I could program all day long, Dave, some just nasty workouts. Like if we do nasty workouts every day, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to get injured and broken and futile and just falling around. So I actually have a full-time, I have a head coach who programs. She does a wonderful job. Her name's Jill. She actually is the affiliate owner of my local affiliate down the road, Cobra Command CrossFit. She's also the head coach for Olivia. So we have both the same coach. And so it is essentially my programming, and it's essentially fit to my weaknesses is what it's fit for. And again, it's not for everybody, right? Like I'm not gonna say that everyone has the same issues I have. Obviously, what did Jacob Heppner struggle with? I was never good at lifting a heavy barbell. I was good at 80%, but for 1 rep maxes, I was not that great at. Did I have a great engine? Absolutely. Do I need to work on that as much? Not as much. And so it's mainly fit to myself. Now, Olivia is actually the complete opposite of me, where, I mean, I think you saw CrossFit Games, we posted her 270
pound jerk.
That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Oh, she doesn't have the same problem as me. I'd be impressed if I could jerk 270 pounds right now, to be honest. The running joke in the barn right now is, and now it's on social media, I get tagged in now all the time, is that I want to stay 100 pounds ahead of her. The problem is I can't jerk 370, guys. Okay. And so I'm quickly falling behind, and I'm never going to catch up. So it was okay with that.
How's her engine, by the way?
She's good. Yeah. 'Cause I mean, that's, she's literally worked out with me for years. So imagine like someone who has a propensity to be stronger that worked out with me for years, but still didn't get rid of that propensity. Like she has an engine, as was apparent at the games this past year. So I'm excited to see the Open and see how that plays out too. Because as we all know, the Open is very engine driven usually.
Well, I'm always curious to see someone like an Emma or a Mal or now an Olivia, these athletes that are coming up that grew up with CrossFit. They weren't transitioning from another sport. You know, they weren't gymnasts, and now they found CrossFit and had a great base. But they actually were 9 and 10 years old or 5 and 6 years old, and their parents own affiliates. So they've been going with their parents, and they're growing up with this sport as their primary route to fitness, and kind of what that translates into them becoming, you know, just superior athletes by the time the games roll around. So I'm curious to see kind of how they turn into these absolute beasts in the next couple of years, and how they fare at the top level. It's
going to be, I mean, look at like the NFL, the evolution of any sport in general, how it has changed from people who are like, oh yeah, I had a regular job, but then I played the NFL for the Detroit Lions or whatever. But now it's like most of my full-time job is all I do, and just the evolution of the human body. Right. I mean, like I always tell people, I've said this for years, is like at some point people will forget how good I was or you were or whoever it was, because these kids coming up, I say kids, these grown women and grown men who are coming up in this sport are going to make us look stupid. Mm-hmm. And I am so here for it.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be the guy being like, oh, back in the day, I could do 20 muscle ups unbroken. And they're like, yeah, that's a Tuesday for me.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, that happens. That happens in all the sports. I mean, like once one person breaks through a barrier, all of a sudden, all these other people are like, oh, that's possible. Like the 4-minute mile, like all of a sudden, like plenty of people are doing it. And the same thing is going to happen with these CrossFit, you know, youngsters that are growing up, and they're going to be like, we thought that wasn't possible to do whatever. And now they're breaking through those barriers. And next thing you know, it's going to be just droves of people doing that. And then they're going to break through something. It's just going to be an amazing thing to watch. Can't wait.
Yeah, it happens ton in the gymnastics world too. I mean, obviously, like somebody like Simone Biles comes around once in a generation and does a huge leap in the sport. You know, it goes from like these small incremental changes to somebody just completely busting through the wall of what people think are humanly possible. But it's a really cool visual in the gymnastics world, because each skill is rated on a level scale in our code of points. So like really simple skills are rated in as A, and they continue to go up in letter value according to the difficulty level. And when I was competing, the skills ended at like F. Like an F level skill was bonkers. Like, you know, there were maybe like a few of those. And now, you know, I finished competing about a decade ago. Now there's J level skills. And that leap in terms of what people are doing is just out of this world. Like you ask any gymnast who has retired now, and they're internally grateful that they're not doing the same sport anymore, because it's not the same sport anymore. So I'm like, yeah, I'm sure a CrossFitter who was in the 2008 games is now looking at the numbers today and being like, that's not even the same sport anymore. You know,
It's
not the same thing.
It's definitely cool though, for sure.
Well, we're coming towards the end here, man. We just got some quick questions for you if you're cool with some rapid fire.
Hit me.
All right. First one, I always like to do this while Chad's on, but just be honest with your answer. What sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Oh, gymnastics.
Yes, look at that. I didn't have to coax you into it. That was fantastic.
I was terrible at weightlifting. Terrible at it.
I love it. Well, from a football background, we don't always get a lot of gymnasts, but I love hearing that. Question number 2. Any guests that you think would be great for us to have on the podcast?
Ooh. Like anybody in general, no like CrossFit.
Yeah, except for like Elon Musk or something like that.
We've had Bezos and Musk.
I mean, I talk to him every Tuesday, but it's whatever.
It's whatever.
Come back to that one. I'll think about it.
All right.
Okay. Are you an avid reader? And if so, do you have any books that you would recommend to our readers that you think they could get a lot out of?
I read all the time. Of course, what read keeps me young. I read a lot of Star Wars books all the time. Okay. I don't care. Currently what I'm reading right now of Star Wars is I'm reading actually a lot of shooting books. So probably not the best for most readers. My wife is having me read an investment book also. So I have like 3 books I'm trying to read at the same time. It's kind of hard. They kind of don't mesh together.
You got to do that sometimes. I actually read the whole Thrawn trilogy. I'm sure you're familiar with those.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've been saying that for, I think the first time I was interviewed at HQ, Sean asked me what's my favorite character, and I said that, and he was impressed. And I was like, dude, they need a show. He's the best character ever.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think I've heard rumors that they are going to be coming out with one.
Yeah, I think it's Benedict Cumberbatch.
Oh, that's perfect. That is perfect.
That's what I said. I said that's a good cast.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite? Obviously, Disney's been coming out with so many new Star Wars movies, but also Disney Plus stuff. What's your favorite of the new stuff that's come out?
It's all been pretty good. Jordan, you been watching Book of Boba Fett?
Yeah, and if I'm being honest, I haven't been that much of a fan of it.
Have you watched the new one as of yesterday?
No, I did not watch last night, but I was pretty pleased with last week's one. So if that one was good, then I'm looking forward to this one.
Sean and I wouldn't I talk all the time about this. Sean and I were talking about this yesterday about it. He hadn't watched either of the last 2 ones. And he was like, I don't like it. I was like, dude, I agree with you. Watch the next 2. Change your mind. He was like, all right. He texted me this morning. He's like, all right, you were right.
All right. We're putting that on the agenda. I love it. All right. Well, I think you might have to text us with a podcast guest, but we appreciate you being on with us today, man.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Of course. Well, is there anything that you want people to know about, anywhere where people can find you? What you got going on next?
I mean, you can just Google me. I'll be doing the tactical game stuff. I'll be out in the open. I won't be doing the open, but I'll be at the games for Olivia. So we'll definitely be there for that.
You can also find them in your local strip club parking lot, apparently. So.
That too. Don't tell my wife.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks again, Jacob. We appreciate the time today. All listeners out there, be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Check out our Instagram page for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Jordan. What is your handle?
Jordan Samuel Photo.
There you go. As well as Oli Chad, even though he's not on here. We want people to love Chad. Give him some love out there on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness. We're your hosts. I'm Dave Durante with my co-host, Jordan Samuel today. And until next time, everyone, thanks for listening.